All right. How's the volume here?
Good. Good. How am I doing?
Pretty good.
Cool.
Hey man, that's not fair. What is that? Is that the volcano?
You know it is.
Oh my God. I got a funny story about that.
Oh, good. I love volcano stories.
Okay, we are recording. Okay, great.
We just had some friends over from Barcelona just for a day.
Cool.
Wonderful people. And I showed one of them the volcano.
It was the first big vaporizer that I remember. My friend had one in 2005. He was maybe I'll tell this story off camera. But in any case, I've got experience going back to it from that long. It was right when it came out, and he kind of finagled his way to get a handle on one. And I remember once we were at his apartment. I was meeting my friend to go to the Metropolitan Opera, and it's not something we did all the time, but it was an older friend of mine, and we just got totally zooted out of our mind on the volcano. And when I got to the opera, I completely forgot how to tie a tie. I just couldn't do it. It like eliminated those brain cells for whatever. I was just going like this, and it was a hell of a concert, though. I had an amazing time.
What did you see?
I think it was Magic Flute.
Yeah. Was it the one with the clear crystal sets that reconvened? And
a lot of these shows I should have went in a little more sober, to be honest with you.
But you might not have had a good time. They did an impressive Magic Flute that I got to see. My mother took me, and it was well, she was alive then, so that's at least 7 or 8 years ago, and before that, so could have been 2005. It was just phenomenal sets, and they were pushing the Freemason connection.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, using the some of the characters had four surface pyramids, and some of them had 5 surface pyramids on their head, and there was because that's a big thing with the Freemasons. I don't know if you know that, but
I didn't know.
And he was supposed to have been a Freemason, Mozart. Who knows? It's like
you can go down a million rabbit holes with this stuff. I mean, it depends on how far you want to go.
Exactly. But it makes good. You have to do something new for a Mozart opera. You can't be. You know what I mean? It's just it's all that last 2 years ago, whatever.
And judging by the average age of the person at the Met Opera, they've been going there for they've seen that opera so many times. They're demanding a new production, and I think that they're the ones paying for it, the patrons, because it's so expensive to put these shows on.
Yeah. Well, I did a project with the dead and Michael Tilson Thomas when he was head of the symphony here, and they told us that the ticket only pays for half.
That's why they have these absolutely unbelievable, extravagant galas.
Right.
To attract every mega rich person in New York City to keep the operation going, because it's just a phenomenal amount of cash to keep this running.
Yeah. And well, the arts are going to suffer in the next 3 years.
I think the big problem is getting the younger people. I mean, when I was going, the big problem that they were trying to make this push to get younger people to go to the opera house. Because the average age was literally like 95. I mean, it was just, half the people were falling asleep. They go there. My friend would tell me, he's like, we go there. It's a great place to fall asleep. He loved it. He thought it was hilarious. But they had this push. I don't know how successful it was, but they were trying to sell. I'm sure they're still doing it. They're trying to sell discount tickets to people in college and people probably under 30. They should probably raise that to like under 40 or under 50 at this point. But I don't know. It's a shame because the shows are absolutely you'll never forget it unless you get a little too high before the show, like I've done a couple of times.
The Magic Flute was very athletic. There were no fat sopranos. It was all really quite amazing. It had neon and all sorts of things built into the set, the set would pivot and turn into something else, another scene, and they would act the scene, and then as they'd walk across the front of the stage, it would start to pivot, and it was clear plastic, so it was like these crystals reconforming, and there'd be a different set, and you knew you were in a different place, and it was pretty fucking good.
It probably is, the top production in the world, at least as far as.
Well, yeah, they got a budget.
Yeah, they've got the budget, they've got the money for it, so why not? So, well, anyways, I think maybe we get started today, kind of talking about your career in music and how you got to do so much interesting stuff and work on all these interesting projects with Stevie Wonder and the Grateful Dead. And
I suppose it really started. I studied music in college, and I was at Hampshire College, which was kind of a hippie school with no grades, and you very much you had to do something. It was kind of modeled on a master's degree kind of thing, where you had something after you had to do a final project that was of some sort of substance before you could graduate. And so I was composing. I found some interesting teachers. I had a jazz teacher that I used to hitchhike to take a lesson with in the snow. It was quite an amazing experience. I'd end up in some little cabin with a piano and a wood burning stove, and he'd teach me harmonies and things like that. And then I had a kind of far out teacher who was a composition teacher, and he was, part of the avant-garde of the 60s, and did very interesting compositions. But anyway, I studied and got tired of school and went out to San Francisco and got a job, and then eventually ended up in a job in computers, which I seem to have a knack for. And also, while I was working in computers, I was finishing a master's degree in composition at San Francisco State. And I told this guy who happened to be a deadhead at the time, I said, if anybody comes in here with music projects, you got to let me know, because I hadn't studied computers. I didn't know. I said, look, these machines seem amazingly powerful. And this was at a company, Osbourne Computers, and they made the first transportable computer, and it was a tiny screen, very fun, and they would just throw me at projects, and I seemed to be able to do them, and I was dealing with translations of software into foreign languages, because everything came up in English in the marketplace. And this guy said, and I said, look, these machines are amazing. If anybody comes in with some music, let me know. I want to know who's using these machines for music. And one day he came to me and said, I just got a call from Stevie Wonder's chief engineer.
It's a safe bet they were using the computer for a music-related project.
And he said, I don't know what he's doing with it, but they called for some support, and he was on the support lines. And I said, well, can I call him back? I want to call him back and find out what they're doing. And they had to clear it, because I wasn't in the support department. That, here's this guy from some other translations department.
This was all on the same day, though.
Yes. And then the next day, I think it was the next day, he finally came back and said, they said it's fine. Here's the number. Guy's name is Lon Neumann. Um, Brilliant guy, still in the business. And I called him up and we started chatting and we had all these interesting conversations. But Steve was really, um, what he wanted to do was to bus. I mean, these primitive computers were primitive at the time compared to the way they are now. And he wanted to bus information from the computer out to a voice synthesizer.
What is a voice synthesizer?
It was a voice. It synthesized a voice, so it would. Stevie had this experience with a Ray Kurzweil machine, and a lot of people know Ray from the music business, but he is a visionary guy, and he developed this system where you could Xerox, or effectively had a machine and you could Xerox it. And it was really the first thing that would convert analog text into digital text. So, and that would route it to a voice synthesizer inside the machine. And you could sit there and kind of Xerox a newspaper, and it would just start reading the newspaper to you. So this was for Steve. This was a huge vision of digital entry for the blind. For Ray and Xerox Corporation, who bought the technology from him, it was a way of bridging the gap between analog technology and digital technology. So you could take your old records, as in data records of clients or patients or whatever it is, and convert them into a digital format and then be able to manipulate them with your computer, whether that was for research or personal information. But really the starting place, this is kind of something that is standard now in the, you can have your screen read to you for the blind, or you can have conversions. Nobody bothers now. I doubt the market is very big for this because everybody starts digitally.
What year was this?
Late 1980. As I started working with Steve in 81. And so Steve, and this was fascinating. So I thought, okay, I'm doing all this code for the company. Lon told me the ideas. I went. I and Steve had bought one of these voice synthesizers at that time, and so I wrote some software to allow him to route his computer information out to the voice synthesizer, and basically allow him to have a contact file where he could enter the names, their telephone numbers. He's a big telephone guy. He's like, he can have 5 to 9 conversations on the phone, just switching back, multiple phones, and okay, hold on, and and come back, and it was really quite amazing to have a phone conversation when he was in that mode, because you really had to hold on to your thoughts because it could be interrupted by some other important call. And so and then he said, well, what I really want out of all this is to get my synthesizers to talk to me so I can program.
When you mean speak to him, you mean speak English, like tell him what the parameters are of whatever he was.
Through the voice synthesizer.
It's not like speak and in like a, you know, like really play like an incredible sound speak type thing. You know what I mean? Like a musician, I might say, "Hey, I'm trying to get the guitar to speak to me, man." You know?
Yeah, no, he wanted to program his machines in a sense. He's an absolute genius. So he just wanted to go deeper into his synthesizers and moving into this digital realm. It was getting kind of complicated, and there weren't that many people around him who were able to understand the parameters at the time. You have to remember that this is very new. There is a revolution happening in the information world, in the data world. Once things became digital, it just exploded. So, and this was about the time that Karma at Stanford was developing the DX7. So Midi was just about to come out as a standard for communication, which alone was a revolutionary idea. So he said, could you work on that for me? And so I started researching that. I started talking to the voice synthesizer company. How does the bus work to get it out there? We ended up developing a system for him on the Kurzweil 250, which was the first Kurzweil out. And I think our serial number for that was 1.
Okay.
And I sent the parameters to them, and they made it come back so that there was an RS-232 port on the machine. I could plug in the voice synthesizer, hit a certain mode, and everything that was on the screen would come out. But you still have to know what's important on that screen for whatever you're doing. So my first task was to learn how to operate the synthesizers. And so I would go in to the studio quite often when he wasn't there and just play around and allow myself to make mistakes and understand and twist knobs and hit buttons and increase parameters, lower parameters, whatever it needed. Learn how the built-in sequencers worked, all that kind of stuff. And then, at some point, Steve would come in to work, and I'd try to get out of the way as efficiently possible so I wouldn't be interrupting his sessions.
And this is down in LA?
Yeah, Wonderland Studios. And so at one session, he would hear me finishing as he'd come in, and sometimes I'd get there before he left, and he'd hear me manipulating sounds and things like that. And one day he just turned to me and said, "Hey, Bob, you want to stay for a session? I think we could use you."
What are you going to say? I mean,
I said, "Yes." I mean, what the hell? So, but he had invited me to one session earlier just to introduce himself to me and what he's doing and all that kind of stuff. And I sat like a fly on the wall just to watch what was going on. And, I'd almost had a master's degree at this point. And Steve started playing a CS80, Yamaha old synth that with a ribbon controller. He was a master of this machine. And he started doing this overdub to a song. And it was it was awakening like nothing else. I mean, I could feel the joy coming down from the sky, entering his body and coming out. I said to myself, this is what I've been waiting for. This I will call my first music lesson.
It's incredible. Was How many people would be in the studio with you? Would there?
Maybe 4 people. I mean, it was just an overdub,
Yeah.
two engineers, the engineer, the assistant engineer, the chief engineer be around for a couple of things, and 1 or 2 people, you know. But at other times, he might have a string orchestra in there.
Wow.
It was a huge studio,
Yeah.
and there might be other people, or if there's a guest coming in, they might have an entourage, and it's all. But it was definitely uh, past a certain place was the music place. There's a place to observe and a place to be with the guy who's playing. you know and at that invitation, he invited me on the inside. That was, it was for me, it was quite a big moment. And just amazing subtlety, nuance, variety, just going through each take, each interpretation, how he wanted it, and you just so much intention and and grace about the way he was playing. It's just beautiful. So I had that experience, and then later he said, "You want to stay for the session?" And I think we could use you. It was an invitation to be a part of that experience, and not something just to watch. And then I think by around this time, Osbourne went bankrupt. The company that I was, and they couldn't pay me. They paid me in German computers or something like that. They give me something with a keyboard that's really useless in the United States. You know what I mean?
Right. And there's actually like a Wikipedia article on this. They call it the Osbourne effect. They, I mean, is this true that this is what led to, apparently there was there was also competition from other people making similar machines, but the story is that the main cause of the bankruptcy was that they announced their next product too soon, and it killed the sales of the current machine. And I guess they couldn't get the new product out the door fast enough. And they had grown so quickly that they had 3,000 employees or something at this point, and they just couldn't keep up with the operating costs, and they had to fold. Is that more or less what you remember?
That's exactly as I remember it. It was announced early and hadn't been fully tested. So when they started testing, of course, they found certain errors. It just wasn't ready, and that eagerness to announce it, and then followed what were very very uh, uh, you know uh, awfully called Black Fridays, where there'd be an announcement and then boom, a certain number of people were let go. I was not a real official uh, part of the staff there. I was still being paid as a Kelly temp. What allowed me to stay on longer than most people,
Really?
because I wasn't in that category, right? So it was just a temporary thing, and they needed, somehow it was, and the European market was still growing while the American market had shut down, and the European market at this point was very small compared to the United States, and there were issues. You could only sell. France has, for example, a language uh, consortium, and no business can happen in France without the okay. It's a language consortium, So I could use I couldn't use certain words that you would use like computador in other French markets. It had to be ordinateur or something, something very French, and only the French allow this word to use. And so there were all these kinds of barriers, which of course now the internet is just blown out of the water because everybody knows what everything is. So
You got ended up getting paid off in the Osbourne one.
yes, exactly. With a German keyboard that you couldn't sell to anybody to make the
And since the whole point of this computer that it was a completely self-contained machine with the keyboard, the screen, the disk drive, and the power supply, and I think you were telling me they marketed it as you could fit it under an airplane seat, which I'm assuming were a lot bigger back then. Um, you couldn't just easily swap out the keyboard.
no, it was, as I recall, it was hardwired.
Okay.
But it wasn't just the keyboard, it was the screen that would come up in German.
Oh,
So you'd hit something that you thought, if you were typing as though you're not looking the way you would type in America, it'd come up as almost English, but there'd be certain keys that we use for a certain letter that are umlauts, or something you're not used to in English. And
how many of these machines did they dump on you in the end?
I think I ended up with 4.
Okay. But they weighed what, like 25 pounds each?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, many years later, I went through the Smithsonian, and they had them all there. It's like, oh, maybe I should have held on to these.
I think it's considered the first successful, like truly portable computer in that it was completely self-contained, right?
Well, one of the reasons it was so successful that way um, is that Adam Osborne was the first person to bundle software with it.
Which we take completely for granted now.
Exactly, and so I had an old North Star at home that I was doing a word processing business on for a while, and you had to buy you had to buy the operating system, you had to buy the word processor, you had to buy the calculators, you had to buy anything that you wanted to add on. You had to buy separately, and then when you bought the computer, it was useless. You had to have all these things, and you had to trust the guy who was selling you stuff, that he wasn't selling you stuff you didn't use.
And who's to say the software is going to work on that machine too, right? I mean,
Oh well, you always bought it from the same guy who sold you them.
okay. But with Osborne, the computer came with the software preloaded, I guess.
Right off the bat, you bought the machine. You didn't, if you needed extra stuff, you'd have to buy it, but you could do word processing, calculations, spreadsheets. You can do the bulk of what is still being done today. Much finer levels of programming to do it today, but you could do it. You can make that happen. And he was the first guy to do that. So of course it was a very attractive package. It was cheaper than a big box, and there was no possibility of additional screens, though. You had to you had to use that machine. Uh, but of course, people started jumping in on that. They realized, okay, we need to give people a system that works for them, not this piecemeal thing. And so anyway, that was many years ago. And so Steve said, "Let me come in," and I started programming. And then he kept asking me to come in for the sessions because he was getting what he wanted. And he's incredibly articulate, and uh, if it requires the ability to get your ideas out of the way and listen to his. You know, if he says a bell, he wants to hear a bell to play a bell sound on top of this. Um, then you have to, you have to pursue what kind of bell, and it's not just necessarily jump into what you think the bell is. And then when you understand what kind of bell he wants, provide him 7 or 8 to choose from, because it's an abstract thing. This, if you're not making the music yourself and you're asking someone else to, it's a bit abstract, and you have to provide uh, provide the options for him, and explore. And the more you work with somebody like that, the the more ability you have to distinguish their needs and what it is they're communicating.
So you had already set up, I guess you said it was the Kurzweil 250, and you had set this up so that it would talk. And you went from that to then like programming sounds.
Yes.
I mean, that's super cool. How would you do that at that time? Because I think this is another thing that people we take for granted now in music production, because you just buy a keyboard, it's got thousands of sounds on it. I mean, you can buy all these. There's so many sounds, you'll never be able to hear them all. You'll never be able to go through all the sounds with all these libraries. You can get a library for $5, with 100 bells. But at this point, I mean, what did this involve? When he says something like this to you, what do you do? I mean, how do you make a bell sound?
Well, I would always start by checking out the presets.
Okay.
you know, and if they had something close to a bell, like maybe uh, an electric piano sound that had a resonance that I liked, that had, that sort of like bell attack, I would start by modifying that. If that didn't yield potential, I'd start looking elsewhere, or maybe observe how that program was made, and start shifting it around uh, until I started understanding that specific synthesizer. And then okay, this has got to have this, and I should change the attack to this. And I did have in college, I did have some experience in their electronic music lab, which had an old Buchla system. So I did understand the analog. I did have an understanding of analog synthesis, and uh, what what is often called subtractive synthesis, which is basically uh, you find a dense sound, you create a dense sound, and you subtract what you don't want out of it. So you start with a kind of a wave, or sawtooth, sine wave, whatever it is, you're closely approximating what you're interested in. So and that's the basis of most analog synthesis. Is you have a fat sound, and you trim it down. You take the marble and take away what you don't want. Digital synthesis is more like drawing. You add the lines that you want to thicken the sound. You don't start with something thick and subtract it. You build it with each piece. So, and a lot of that, a lot of synthesis that was popular then came out of the Karma scene and the DX7, uh, which was I forget the name of the guy who ran that. It was out at Stanford, and a Yamaha had invested in this technology, and they had the rights to it. So they came out with the DX7, and that also came out with Midi. And Midi, they would also sell a box of 7 DX7 brains. So you had the possibility of one keyboard with its sounds and like 8 DX7s in a box next to you, which was the first time that kind of thing happened, that there was just the brain. You always had the keyboard, you always had this, and then sequencers were coming out, and you could manipulate everything. Wonderful, a wonderful synth at the time came out of Germany called the PPG. Wonderful, and I think there's a company. No, it's not that. It's a company that took the PPG technology and made more sense out of it. I can't remember their name right now. Maybe it was a Wurzy. But they made some interesting sounds. And so you had all of this. I mean, one of the things was I had the first one of the first 10 of every synthesizer that was being made. It was Stevie fucking Wonder. Everybody wanted him to play their machine. Everybody wanted the feedback of this guy who is clearly one of the greatest synthesists of all time to have input, opinions, whatever. And so there were a lot of things that I had to learn and run around with, and it was a blast. I mean, you're just dealing with sound and machines, and you're in an environment where there were Myers M1s speakers all over the place. There was we used to travel with the M1s, and I'd set them up in his hotel room for him to play and work on records and things like that when we traveled. It was high quality sound.
What is the M1? Is that a really hi-fi speaker? Or?
Yes, Myers. John, do you know John Myers?
No, I'm not familiar with it. No.
Wonderful speaker maker. Absolutely phenomenal. And it has a unit. He had them in the control room. It has a separate rack mount unit that monitors digitally monitors the sound, so that it's impossible to blow out the speaker. It just shuts off. It just takes care of the business. It's quite phenomenal. It's still around, still used. I have a pair.
So you ended up, I guess, transition. You got this call. It sounds like at a great time, right? Was this shortly before the computer company went under? And I mean, what a route to come into working in music. You just happen to have this job at the computer company, and you got this phone call, and you happened to be there, and you had already laid the groundwork that if something like this happened, somebody would come and knock on your door, and you took advantage of the opportunity, and you'd walk into one of the greatest geniuses of the 20th century.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and he was. It was just a phenomenal thing. There was one guy who was my boss at Osbourne, and he got another job, and he wanted me in with him. And I remember I had one call with him where I said, "Look, man, Ken, I just got an offer to work with Stevie full time, and so I'm going to have to say no." to your office. And he said, well, Bob, I just want to give you this warning that if you make what you love to do your job, then it becomes work. And I'm saying, yeah, I hope so. You know? That's what I'm looking for.
What a great entry. So you ended up so you're a full-time member of the Stevie Wonder organization now. And you ended up, I guess, moving down to Los Angeles.
No, I didn't.
You didn't.
I still maintain my home here in San Francisco. I was there a lot or on the road. We were on the road a lot. And I would travel down there but those were different times for travel. There was no huge security scene, and sometimes I'd get a call at 7:30 here, and I'd be in the studio by midnight in LA.
That's amazing.
Like the same time it would take to commute from parts of LA to.
Especially these days. The traffic is really getting worse. How long did you end up staying with Stevie?
About 8 years.
Were you continually kind of awestruck by being in the room with a player of that talent? And I'm assuming somebody that's probably improvising a lot and coming up with all kinds of amazing musical ideas, and you just happen to be there watching.
Yes, I ended up in a very privileged position because he was interested in everything I was working on. So I was in his hotel room, in his homes, in the studio, on the road, in his bus, quite often in his plane. And just just phenomenal genius. And full of, a spiritual sense that makes it really a privilege to know him. He has an inner glow, and there's like everybody, he's got his own crazy quirks, and he's not some deity. He's just a guy, great sense of humor, laughing a lot, but just phenomenal work. I mean, everybody got to meet a lot of great musicians. Everybody wants his input, especially at that time. It was just everything, went gold or platinum that he does.
I mean, it sounds like this was in general a pretty great job.
Yes, yes. I mean, it was brutal as jobs go. The longest day I had, I think, was 74 hours.
That's a long day.
That's a long day. We did a concert in London at Wembley Hall, and then drove out to I think it was Sussex, where there was a studio with a kind of tape recorder, which there were only like 4 in Europe at the time, that he was using at home, which was the 3M digital, and recorded there all night, and then drove back in time for the next show, and then went to the hotel where I set him up with a small digital system in his hotel room, and then went to sleep. It was it could be rough. It could be rough. But I was young. It was easy,
You end up taking on just a lot of kind of responsibilities stacked on top of each other. I guess if you're around all the time, it's going to be kind of inevitable in a situation like this. No.
Uh Yes, but there were a lot of other people to take on certain kinds of things he wanted me to be doing.
Focusing on the machines.
Yeah. I mean, there was other stuff, but it was just like, oh, normal stuff you'd do for a friend. Say, yeah, yeah, here, I'll do that for you, sure. You know, uh, it's not. I never. I mean, certain things would come up where you'd end up having, there'd be copyright issues or something, and you'd have to talk to a lawyer or something like that, and that stuff fades pretty quick. It's like, okay, yeah, but then every job has some character, something that doesn't, isn't happy, and and there's jealousies. I was, yeah, I was pretty close to Steve, and uh, some people didn't think I should be, and so there were things, but never any weirdness from Stevie.
I mean, it sounds like you had an incredible position to be uh, with this new technology, with the Midi, as you were saying, and you had all the synths coming to you, and you must have become like an absolute expert on programming synthesizers and also integrating it with whatever the latest computer technology at the time was.
Right, right. We ended up with a synclav system, which was the height of digital synthesis at the time.
I've heard about that. There was some monster machine.
It was just amazing. Yeah, it was just phenomenal.
What was it?
It was a tower and disk drives and an amazingly complete a keyboard that had maybe 50 buttons on it that lit and things like that. And it had sequencers, and its sample rate was 50K, and and 50K at 44.1, I think. So it was, for that time, because people were, the we had the emulator at that time was 8-bit. It was like, okay, this is, this was full 16-bit, full huge machine. We got one when we got one, and I think we got one in a backup, and I think one was $250,000
At that time in 1980s money.
at that time.
Wow.
And when I got it delivered, and and the only question Steve asked me when it was delivered, he said, "Is it bigger than Michael's?"
So did this thing weigh 100 pound, hundreds of pounds, and show up in like a shipping crate?
Yeah, in crates, everything shows up.
Crates, right? It all shows up in crates. Okay, incredible, incredible.
And if you didn't attach it wrong, it didn't. If you attached it in the wrong order, it didn't work. You had to reattach it. You had to things had to boot up in a certain order and things like that. It was, it was a it it, it was really quite an amazing time because it was cowboys in the Wild West. Um, Technology was mushrooming. There were opportunities everywhere that was just seemed to be limited by your ideas, and so if you could think it, there was some way to execute it. It took a lot of effort and work, uh, but um, th- the boundaries weren't established. There's boundaries now that are based on business. In the computer world, there's boundaries based on how much money it has to make. I mean, uh, there was a time, for example, in San Francisco, when all these tech companies were booming, and they were giving money to artists to say, do something with our machine. We've made this machine, but we need you to show us where it can go. And there were these festivals and digital parties all over town, and it was a different time. And now it's everything's it was also a time when you felt, when in the business world, if you had a great idea, maybe you could turn it into a huge business. Now, if you have a great idea, you're hoping somebody will buy it, either to kill it or to turn it into their business. The individual is no longer that big unless you're the oligarchs, right? So then individuality counts. But now, while back then it was kind of the old style of, you know, you can make your mark in this world and do something.
And what a great place to be for that whole thing. We talked. I think you said the two big projects you worked on, or the two albums you worked on, were "Woman in Red" and "In Square Circle" during that time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me first say that the first time, I think this was before I got hired, the first project I worked on was, we had this business meeting at 3 o'clock in the morning in Steve's studio with his yawning lawyers and accountants and things, and they had some business. And then he said, "Well, I'm going to be doing some shows in Radio City Music Hall, and I want a robot to introduce me. Do you think you could make that happen?" I said, "Well, there's some interesting things happening with robots. I think that's really quite possible. Let me see what I come up with, but I'll get working on it." And then I said, "And Steve, when do the shows start?" He said, "Oh, next Wednesday." So I ended up pulling it off, but I did it with mall robots that were remote controlled, like the guy in Lost in Space, the Danger Will Robinson character. It was,
This was like a remote, like somebody would hire to, like, I think there's this in a movie somewhere. You hire the robot to bring the drinks, right, with a remote control and this kind of thing. Very simple kind of functionality, and it's basically like a remote control car with some arms.
yeah, yeah. And there would be a guy running it, but because the time limited, and I ended up having to use these costumers from the Joffrey Ballet, because we couldn't put it out in front with Stevie as this sort of mall robot. It had to look cooler than that. And so I flew to New York early, met with them, and did all this stuff. And he said, and also I wanted to use this Kurzweil synthesizer voice from the Kurzweil reading machine. So I had written him software for that. So I modified to route. So I used the Osbourne and I modified it to be able to write a line and hit return, and the line would be said, or interfere and type something and it would be said. So I said, okay. And I was programming that at the Hilton across the street from Radio City till 3 o'clock in the morning the night before the show. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. So I get to the venue, and I see Steve, and he talks to the tour manager, and he turns to Steve and says, "Yeah, but Steve, we've already got all these DJs set up to interview. to introduce you. And I said, well, he said, well, Bob, you work it out with them. So I went to each DJ and I set up a script. And he would say a line that would be my cue to hit return, and the voice of the robot would come out. And when that voice came out, that would be cue to the guy in remote control to bring the robot out. And then we would follow this script. And it worked really well. No problem to the last night. And this last night, the DJ from a Long Island station would taunt the audience by saying Stevie Wonder's name, but not introducing him. And so he was, they were ready for Steve, and I couldn't get him. And the tour manager saying, let's get this thing going. They're looking at me like I'm in control, but I'm waiting for my cue. So, and it was going on too long. So finally, I just hit shut up, hit return. The voice came out, the robot came out, and the guy knew it was time to do the script.
That's pretty cool.
And then one day he said, we were working in the studio, said, we're going on tour around the United States. Would you like to join us? You could make sure that all these machines are working on stage and all that. I said, yeah. And then and that's really when the relationship began to get kind of deeper.
What were these tours like? Were they? What are your any great stories or memories from them? That
Well, there are so many. They were bus tours for the most part. Some plane travel. It was, the band was amazing. They were amazing people. Things would happen. We were constantly making records. Steve was always recording. In my experience with Steve, which was about 8 years long, on average, he wrote a song a day.
A full song with lyrics and.
It wouldn't necessarily be. It wouldn't be necessarily be a full song, but it was. It would have a verse and a chorus, and some of the lyrics would be done. You knew that if he spent 20 minutes on it, it would be done. It was that kind of all the idea was there. And I asked him once, I said, Steve, I can bring you an infinite number of sounds. Whatever you want, you just ask for it and we'll try to get it. That's happening. With all those options, how do you know how to produce any of these songs? How do you know which way to go with it? And he said, the very first moment that I hear the song in my head, that I have that feeling about the song, I want to orchestrate it to enhance that feeling. So that very moment of the birth of the song, he hears where it's going to go. And anything that takes away from that feeling, he's not interested in for that song. Could be appropriate for another song, but this sense of a constant flow, and it's always there, and it's always coming, and it's just this gift he has. And very spiritual guy. And it was really quite amazing. I mean, I would say, every once in a while I can pull that off, but most of the time I have to think about where's this, where do I put these lyrics? How do I do this? Well, how does it feel if I slow it down? How does it feel if I speed it up? Sometimes I'll write a song that it's fast and I realize, oh, it's much better slowed down. But still, if I didn't pursue it at that fast speed, I might not have written it. This is where it feels like it's flowing for me. Well, for him, it's flowing at all levels all the time. And so it's like, okay, this one has to go in that direction, this one that direction. It's amazing.
Um, talk about, if you will, the Woman in Red album, which was the Gene Wilder movie, which I don't think a lot of people have seen, but it launched one of the biggest hits I think ever in recorded music history. I Just Called to Say I Love You. And is it true that people were like suggesting that he not release the song because it might be a little cheesy? Or
Well, I don't know. I think there were people who, and I would say I would include myself in this. Is that it was it was for the guy who did Living for the City and who has written so much that I had seen that I thought was amazing material. It seemed very tame and sweet, and perhaps a little too sweet for me, you know? And Steve said, no, this is going to be a hit. You don't get it. This is going to be a big hit. He knew right away. And he knew exactly what he was doing the whole time. And, he was right. He was absolutely right. And it was very, it's just an interesting thing. It was just, how he knew that, I guess, is just his experience. And it was a fantastic experience working on that record because it was, I got to meet and work with Dionne Warwick, who was phenomenal, you know. Uh, and we had Steve Stevie Wonder was chronically late to most things. He could be 8 hours late to a video shoot, and people are standing around, and they're getting overtime by the time he shows up. So, and he would sometimes be late to the studio, even when she was there, and she's a smoker. I don't know how else she could get that gorgeous voice. But she would sit around and play Miss Pac-Man. We had one of those arcades in the studio, and smoke cigarettes and play Miss Pac-Man and get impatient for him. And yet, when Steve showed up and she was right there, it was just magical. To hear that voice coming over the speakers, just amazing.
did they write the songs together, or how did it work
No, Steve wrote the songs.
for her specifically?
Yes, yes. I mean, some of them, for me, uh, have uh, that match to her voice that, um, what's his name had? Burt Bacharach. You can't lose him. Yeah. So Burt Bacharach, there are times, he had a magical combination. Burt Bacharach had this magical connection with Dionne Warwick, who could express his songs and he could write for her. Phenomenal. Listen to those. things. A few other writers back then for her were good too, but there were moments during the Woman in Red recording that I felt, oh, he's hit that. Steve has hit that connection where she can just do it, and it becomes the song just lifts up off of the surface. It's just wonderful.
And you programmed the sounds on this record.
Yes. Actually, there were some of the bells that was what I was thinking about, was those sessions, those bells.
That's incredibly cool. I mean, to work on a project that ends up traveling all around the world. I looked up. I just called to say I love you. Went number one in 28 countries worldwide, and I'm assuming it probably went number one in a lot more because who knows how many countries in the world they were actually charting this stuff in. And it was like one of these multi-generational songs that was completely ubiquitous and just everybody loved it. It's a feel-good song with a great message. And little kids loved it, old people loved it, couples loved it. Everybody heard that song. I mean, that's absolutely amazing to be involved in that and be part of the creative process.
And remember, I told you that Steve was a big phone guy,
Yeah,
so he'd call from anywhere in the world. He was calling from anywhere. It was part of his. It was really part of him. That song. It was just his life.
really cool. What was the Martin Luther King event that you were involved in with Bob Dylan?
Well, there were a lot of things happening there that were really, really kind of magical. One was we had Dylan was working with the Wonder Love, which was the name of the band, and which is just phenomenal musicians. Just to get into that position, you have to be an ace. And Dennis was playing drums, and Dylan goes out to do a tune with them in rehearsal. And Dennis Davis was playing drums, and they run through a song, and I think it might have been "I Shall Be Released," and Dylan is singing the song, and he stops and he says, "This isn't working. I don't know what's going on. This isn't really working." She says, "What's not happening?" He says, "I don't know. The feel is off." And he says, "Well, hold on a minute." And of course, this was for TV, so the drum riser was kind of high up above the band, and with this sort of platforms moving around. And he says, "Take me up to the drums." So his brother Calvin brings him up to the drums, and he says, "Dennis, let me play a little bit." So Dennis Davis sits him down on the drum stool, takes his hand, and shows him where each drum is. Here's your hi-hat, here's your toms, here's your snare. Got that? Chief says, "Yeah, okay, I got it." He counts off the song and plays it. And Bob sings through the whole song. And at the end, he turns around and he says, "That's it." And Steve just turned to Dennis at that time and said, "So play it like that."
Amazing.
And it worked beautifully. It's just like, okay. And he wasn't playing drums much when I was with him. He had drum machines and all that technology, and he did that amazingly.
He's also, I think, a world-class drummer, right?
Yes. It's just amazing. He played drums on a lot of his early stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a video of I think they're talking about one of those English videos about the making of certain records. There's one where they're listening to some old stuff, and Gary Olazabal, the engineer, was there, and they said, he said, wait a minute, bring up the drums. And Gary brings up the drums, just the tom toms. He's listening to the tom toms. He's, damn, you hear all those mistakes? That's embarrassing. He's saying all this on camera. And Gary just says, yeah, Steve, but that's what makes it funky. Oh, there's another story from that. Those sessions, those sessions had a wonderful, wonderful uh, time. Uh, there was a rehearsal in some different place, and it was uh, it was Stevie, Bob Dylan, and Peter, Paul, and Mary singing "Blowing in the Wind" together. All three had hits with that song. All three groups, all five of them. And Steve, being the kind of guy he is, said, Bob, this is your tune. Why don't you start it out? And it was really, really rough. And so Steve says to me, Bob, you got a drum machine? Pull out a drum machine. He puts a groove together. He says, okay, let's try this. And then with the groove, everything kind of worked out great. I'm not sure that the tune made the final edit in the broadcast, but it all worked out. And then later that afternoon, I'm taking the limos. I'm looking for a limo back to the hotel, and Peter PDRO is from the Peter, Paul, and Mary. Is in the is got a limo. I said, "Can I join you?" He said, "Sure." I get in the car with him. He goes, "Oh, you're that guy with Stevie, right? For the Dylan rehearsal?" I said, "Yeah, I was there. That was me with the drum machine." And he said, "Tell Stevie this about Dylan." He said, and I can say this now because Pete's dead. But he said, "Never let him set a tempo or do the first lyrics. He'll always blow it." But because I think he's always thinking of new ways to sing his old songs. So it's not, whatever reference you have to it is he's already past that. So that's my image of what was going on, because he's so, you know. Although I saw these kinds of mistakes, and it wasn't until I started working with the Dead, which my first real big tour was the Dylan Dead tour. Th- when I started to see him in that context and deliver a line that I'd heard a million times before, and he'd be fresh and brand new, and it would float over a stadium of people, and you could feel that the audience was hearing this differently than they'd ever heard it before. And I realized, oh, this is what he does. It wasn't, Stevie's like a pro musician, and Dylan knows what he wants, and he plays exactly what he wants to play. But he's always, I think, inventing this newness to things. He's got a new take on everything all the time because he's keeping it alive for him. So I think that's what was going on when they were doing "Blowing in the Wind," which everybody thought, oh, we just do "Blowing in the Wind," but it's his song. He's going to do it differently than you expect.
In one of the books about that tour, I can't remember what book it is, but there's stories where it says, like, I guess Jerry had to teach Bob some of his songs. Bob had forgotten some of his songs. They had to, I guess the Dead had been playing these songs for so long, they knew them better than he did. But that's quite an incredible connection that you had that experience working with Dylan with Stevie Wonder, and that later ends up being the first tour that you do with the Grateful Dead. Before we get into that, let's talk about how you made that transition. And you were saying it was at the Grammy Awards in 1985.
Right.
The Synthesizer medley with Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, Thomas Dolby, and Howard Jones. And the video is on YouTube. It's a crazy setup, right? In like an octagon type thing with like 20 synths on racks. And I guess, what was the whole purpose of this event?
Well, everyone, Herbie had Rocket. I think it might have been, it was Blinded Me with Science. Steve had, I guess it was I Just Called to Say I Love You. And they were all hits. And Howard Jones had one, the name of which escapes me right now, but they all had hits. They were all synthesizer virtuosos. They had fantastic, success with that. And so it was about featuring this group of guys who had hits. And so there was a medley of those songs. And there was, and then Steve also added the Black National Anthem at the end. Lift Every Voice. He just snuck it in. It was good. It was good. So it was wonderful, a wonderful experience. And Merl Saunders, who was very involved in the NARAS organization, who put on the Grammys, was watching, as many people were watching the rehearsal to see what was going on. And he came over to me afterwards and said, "Hey, you know how to operate all these machines?" I go, "Yeah, that's what I do." Because Stevie was the host. We rehearsed in Stevie's studio, and he brought all of his equipment. Most of them, I don't think anybody else brought equipment.
That was all Stevie stuff on stage.
It was all Stevie stuff on stage.
So you set that whole thing up?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he said, "Did you ever think about doing TV music?" He said. I said, "Yeah, it sounds like fun. I've thought about it." He said, "Well, contact me when you're back in San Francisco." So when I had a break. I contacted him, and he was doing the score for the CBS remake of the Twilight Zone, in which Phil DeGuerre was the producer. He was a Deadhead, so he knew about Merle's background with Jerry and with the band. And so part of his mission in doing the score was to bring the Grateful Dead into it when it was working for everybody. They had, at that point, done the theme music. And he asked me if I would help him with the technology to do the score. So this was before the images were being delivered, but I came in. They wanted me to sample the band. And that was a bit awkward. I remember having this sampling session with Bobby, where okay, we're ready to sample, and he would start playing these scales, and I'd get every note, and I'm thinking, this is useless. what am I going? I mean, even if I play these notes or Merle plays these notes, it's not going to sound like Bobby. And so at that point, at one point we were taking a break. I said, Bobby, I've got a different idea. He said, oh, okay, let's try it. As he goes into the studio and I go in over the headphones, I say, okay, play First View of the Coffin. And he does one of those Bobby sound things that just goes, wow. And I'm like, okay, I can use that. Place that with a little shimmering light, and you're in the Twilight Zone right away. And so we did a couple of those, and we ended up placing a few of them in different episodes. But also, you'd have now. Merle was responsible for the score. I very quickly connected with Mickey Hart about sort of the avant-garde sound thing. And, in the 60s in the classical music world, there was all this use of different sounds and, the John Cage, George Crumb kind of scene where different things would be used. There's even a John Cage piece I saw recently that had somebody playing a cactus, just all sorts of weird stuff. And Mickey definitely into sound as a texture, as a transformative thing. And we really connected on that, from water phones to Tibetan prayer bells, which are all over the Twilight Zone. And things like that. So, and it ended up that Mickey ended up with the sound design for the score. So, and I was the only person who went between both sessions. So I would do the scoring part of the show in the beginning of the week with Merle, and then go up to Mickey's studios, or Mickey's studio hadn't been built yet. So go into a studio, mostly in San Francisco, and do a session about the sound. But I was the only one who knew what was coming on the scoring tracks or knew what was going on in the sound design tracks. So I would say, Mickey, Merle's got a pretty good cue here. And they would trade them the sounds back and forth. But the first thing Merle would do is, you'd get a slave reel with a stereo of the sound design, or a slave reel with a stereo of the score. And both of them did this. The first thing they do is turn down the other guy's tracks. It's like, I don't want to be. So I would say, Merle's got a pretty good cue on this. You might want to just feed into that and do something light here. You don't have to take over the whole scene. Or I'd say to Merle, Mickey's got some pretty good sound design. You might just need a flute. You don't have you don't need a band here. You just need something to come through these sound designs and tie it all together. And so that became effective enough that they would fight over me. And one day, I got a Sunday afternoon, I got a call from from Phil Daguerre, who was a wonderful guy, but we hadn't met at this point. And he said, "Hi, Bob. This is Phil Daguerre. Do you know who I am?" I said, "Of course I know who you are." He said, "Oh, good. Well, I wanted to know who you are, because I'm trying to figure out why Mickey and Merle are fighting over you all the time." So it's like, okay, I'm just doing the job. But it was a very sweet call and a very nice experience, and the series worked out great at then. And if you if you go into later parts of the series, I think there's maybe a year, a season or two after the Grateful Dead were involved, and they're tamer. They're more traditional in their scoring approach, and that was very interesting for me to hear because I went off and did I was still working with Stevie. I did a tour of Japan at the end of the season and went back and forth for a little bit. And then the engineers and the guys had met the entire band, and I had met John Barlow. And Barlow was quite a fan of my work and was very supportive in making sure that I would do some work with Bobby. We did a song together, the three of us, called The Photon Bop. I don't know if I have a copy of it, but it never went too far. And when they were doing In the Dark, they were looking for new sounds, and they remembered my work and called me up and said, "Do you want to do this? Do you want to come in for a few sessions?" So that started to blossom. It was close to home, fairly, and it seemed like there was I knew I was leaving. If I were to leave and work with them, I knew at this point that Steve had a good guy, Rob Arbitier, to work with him on the synths. And, after 8 years of a pretty grueling schedule and very little sleep, I thought maybe it's time to try something a little different. And that worked out great. So I did those sessions. I think I did one or two more projects with Steve. We did the first long distance digital overdub with Quincy Jones and Nile Rodgers, and then at the end of the when the record was done, Jerry, I think it was Jerry, said we're going out with Dylan this summer, and we'd love you to come and make sure the sounds work. And then at the end of that tour, which was I was hired for that summer in the probationary kind of period, and at the end of the tour, my probation time was up. I went to a business meeting with the entire band, and they said, "Wait a minute, we'll take care of our business, and you come in at the end." So I came in at the end, and I said, "Hey, this time is up. I'd love to work with you more. I don't know how you guys are feeling." And they all went around the room, and each one of them said, "Well, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. I'm looking forward to working more with you," this kind of thing. The very last guy was Billy Kreutzmann. And he said, "Well, I want to work with you too." And he said, "So hang out as long as you're having a good time." And that was the only job description I ever had with Grateful.
Yeah, I mean, how did you have a boss? How did it work? I mean, was there an office to show up at? Was there a schedule? Or was it just someone calls you and says, "Hey, we need to work on this," and then you just bounce around as kind of like a floating between band members? Or
Well, in the beginning, it was really about the keyboards and the drums because Mickey and I had this connection, and he knew I could take it the next level of drum for the drum solos, and the keyboards needed they were all looking forward to an upgrade in the keyboard sound. But everybody wanted to work with me. as they had said. So as things evolved and technology evolved, I would bring new technology to each one of them and see how they liked it, what it felt like for them to play. How could I sculpt it any better, sculpt the sound so that they work better, sculpt the instruments so that they work better. And it was we had schedules. The band was really pro in their touring life. We had a book for every tour, which had uh, production phone numbers for every gig, hotel phone numbers for every hotel, hours, times, dates of pickup, and we wouldn't leave town without that book. Um, I mean, I left for a 2-week tour with Stevie once, and it lasted 7 months, as they would find more venues to book. So it was a very different scene. Now, um, I had my own office, a bit inaccessible, but you know, I didn't have seniority. It was up a bunch of stairs, so bringing equipment up wasn't a big option. But then I had the space, wherever somebody's space was, I would just set up there and uh, sort of work on their instrument.
So you had an office at the Grateful Dead studio,
Yes,
the Front Street location is.
yes, Front Street. Uh, and but it wasn't, it was a place to dump stuff, because it was upstairs. The music was happening downstairs, and it was and I was in a situation where I was always being exposed and needed to understand new technologies, new things, new ideas, whatever somebody was dealing with. So, in essence, my uh, schedule was more than a lot of people's. Now, not to say those guys didn't spend their years with no life. Everybody. I don't mean the band, because they had their own discipline going on individually for them, their own music. But in terms of the support staff, they'd all been through it, and their setups were pretty stable. So if they needed a day to set up, um, when we rehearsed, it was essentially the stage setup. So they didn't need more than a day to set that up, and then they'd be around for the rehearsals. Um, but I might need to go in and figure out how much pitch bend this sound needs for Jerry to get his vibrato that he uses on the guitar to translate to the synthesizer.
This was MIDI stuff you were doing for Jerry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that that would became a something. Or how do I integrate this new drum machine into uh, the the drum grooves that I'm producing for the drum solos? And how do I use this? How do I do that? And there was time on stage to do it, but
Cool.
every Grateful Dead tour, I brought every musician new sounds. So I was constantly trying to produce new material for them to have fun with, because when somebody plays your sound in front of 20,000 people and gets them off, it feels good.
Did you work with, I guess, Brent the most because you're a keyboard player, he's a keyboard player, and
Um, there was that was there in the beginning. I was working with him the most. At some point, things got to be stabilized in terms of his rig and what he wanted and how he wanted to control things. And so then at that point, it's just providing new sounds that slipped into the rig. You, um, one of the things about the Grateful Dead is that each member has a very different perspective on music. So I realized pretty quickly that my experience with Stevie Wonder, it was Stevie Wonder's perspective on music that needed to be maintained. He was the guy whose vision was being executed. With the Grateful Dead, everybody's vision was being executed. So I wanted to make a sound systems for each person to feel like they were in control of their sonic universe. So what Phil liked and how Phil liked to play and what kind of sounds he liked to play was completely independent from Jerry or Bobby or Brent. So that required designing a system for that individual to play that fit into their system of playing and then providing those sounds. Once the system was in place, you could swap in and out of sounds with a sort of, I thought, elegance, because you could just slide this in and have, oh, here's this new horn sound. Do you like this better on this tune or that tune? How do you get to it? Here it is. Boom. That's all you need. Or he might critique it. Oh, it lasts a little too long. Can you make it shorter? Can you do this? Um, so that was going on with everybody. It started with Brent, and and Mickey, but it really grew from there because as Bobby was fairly independent, uh, though I was able to give him some support, but he ended up with a synth embedded in his guitar that he could control, and did some programming on that synth, but he was pretty independent on that. And also, he was out there on his own. I could slide in from the side to Phil, or slide into this in between Jerry or Brent and be there. But Bobby was in the center of the stage. There wasn't anything that I could do for him that didn't involve a sort of a show interruption, if you know what I mean. Somebody had to walk across the stage and twiddle a knob. And that's sort of like, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we have to stop for this to get it right. So he would often tell me, change this preset before I play, do this before I get out there. But once he got out there, he was pretty independent. Brent could turn around to me and say, what button do I need to push for this? You know,
How many sounds would Brent have like in a typical night besides the B3? I'm listening back to some records now. It seemed like there was quite a variations depending on the tune as far as like the piano sound. Like some of them sounded like in Dupree's Diamond Blues, for instance. I've got this image of him sitting in a Wild West saloon on this like funky upright piano. It's got almost this carnival sound. It's so infectious and bright and perfect for the song. Did he switch around his keyboard sound or his piano sound for different songs?
yes, yes. And often he would layer um, electric piano onto his acoustic piano sound.
Because he got great sounds. I mean,
Before me, there was this GS1, I think it was a Yamaha GS1 that he used a lot.
that had sounds built in.
Yes. Well, it wasn't, it was sort of built in. You had to read a card, a little strip. There was a digital magnetic strip that would change the sounds. and it was they he was, I think, tired of it. But it's interesting talking to people. For me, it was a very non-pianistic sound. It didn't sound really like a piano, and had a very it had a very electric piano sound, but it also uh, was a very short-lived sound, which I can. But for some people, that's the favorite sound he ever played. You know, and it was the sound I was brought in to change, I think. you know, but they had already changed that sound, and they had bought new technology. Kid Candelaria was aware of the technology changing. He was not in control of it, so he was happy to have me to come in and help. But I had a given keyboard, that Kurzweil Midi board had been bought. No, it was bought before I got there, but they didn't use it because they didn't really know how to make it effective. They had a wonderful guy in Philadelphia who had recommended it, and it was pretty advanced at the time. And I remember you can hear it. One of the buttons that I was very quick to hook up was a button that I sent to the piano sound that allowed it to put chorus on the sound. And I remember listening to Brent just using that so beautifully, that he'd play through something with an electric piano sound, and it would establish the first verse and the chorus. And the next time, the second verse, there'd just be a little chorusing, a little shimmer on the electric piano. And it would just evolve. And all of a sudden you were feeling, oh, this is a new stage in the story. He's moved the sound into another dimension. And then by the third verse, there'd be a whole new way to look at it. And it just beautifully, beautifully done. I just saw the Blow Away on YouTube. It's just fantastic.
I love that song. I love that song. I mean, the intensity, the passion, the when he's getting up on top, standing up and singing. It's one of the like strongest musical performances I can think of. Most authentic musical performance. It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Now, Brent came to me one day when I just got hired, and somebody introduced me to him, and he's, he said, "Oh, cool. Now you're the new guy."
What were you doing with the drum stuff? Because I guess were they already when did they start using electronic drums? Was that before you became part of the band?
Well, Mickey had the Beam.
Explain what that is, because I don't think a lot of people. I don't even really know what it is. I've seen photos of it, and it's like what? It's 8 strings or something.
One, two, three. It sounds close to right. It sounds good. I can't remember offhand. It's an I beam. You know,
Literally, like a framing member for like a construction.
exactly, metal I beam that has custom made, oversized piano strings uh, strung across the I beam, and a pickup, a custom made pickup, beautifully designed to take to pick up incredibly. It's a Tom Paddock design, I believe, and it picks up very gentle subtleties and allows the use of a uh, steel pipe to be banging on them on the strings, if that's what Mickey wants to do, or just these little subtle vibrations that he does. So really, really fun instrument. So that was there. There was the brand new pickup came when I was there, as well as a rack for amplifying it. And he had no pads. He had no electronic pads. Neither one of them had electronic pads before I was there. So I brought in all of those electronic pads. I was doing I was mixing it, the electronics. I had a 48 input Gamble console just for the electronic drums, and it was full. There were delays and reverbs and all the sound banks. And Billy and Mickey had drum pads. They had marimba pads. They had octapads. They had there was a round thing from Roland, I think it was, that had wonderful sensitivities where you could hit it on the side, you could do a side stick, you could hit it in the center, or you could hit it on the edge. It was, I'm sure it's still out there. So all of that was brought in. I was doing the sequencing there. I used a Linn drum machine to do some of the sequencing and a couple of other drum machines, and then throw those sounds into reverbs or into delays or both, or feed them back. It was really fun.
Where did you set up? Like, were you on the side? Were you in the soundboard, or?
Well, where the beast was, the big drums, I was right behind that. So we had eye contact. He just turned to me. If he turned away from the audience, he looked at me.
So you got to be really tuned in here, right? Because I mean, a lot of this stuff's being done on the fly, I'm assuming.
Right. You got to be tuned in. In fact, a couple of times Mickey said, "Smoke this, so we're on the same page when I need you."
It's one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you, if you ever like partied a little too much, and
Never happened.
it never happened.
Only because because the amount I was indulging in was probably put at my tolerance. But I also just took it so seriously. To me, this was what could make me higher than doing this work.
Yeah, and also it's a Grateful Dead concert. There's not a set show where you can just kind of go through the motions. You've got to be on point. You've got to be paying attention to see what's coming next, right?
Right. And who might have a problem, what's going on. I mean, it's okay to be loose and into the music, but if you're lost, who cares? Who cares? Who cares what you're doing? You're not contributing. If you're lost, you're lost. And this is, a jet. It's a submarine. It's a something that all hands on board.
And when did you start playing on drums in space? Did that happen early on? And
It didn't happen early on because I didn't see that as my job. But I ended up feeling that the drums always ended with the beam, and it seemed like there was only one place for Mickey to go with it. So I started to add these textures by playing just a synth pad that would allow some evolution and would allow Mickey to respond and play the beam in response to it, and give him a different direction to go in, and maybe to end it slightly differently, or and be able to pull it out if he wanted to sustain what he was doing further. And I took the risk on one night, and it wasn't very high volumes. because I was just sort of checking up. My eye was on Mickey, and he dug it. So, he eventually said, just do what you do at the end, and we'll see where it goes. Um, it it was a process of not looking. I wasn't looking um, for the light to be shining on me. I was looking to find the way to frame what he was doing and elevate it. There's this thing in painting when you have a show where you have to pick the right frame for a painting to put in. And if you pick the right frame, it it just encases the spirit of the painting perfectly. If you pick for the wrong frame, it detracts. So I was constantly looking for the frame that would stimulate him and excite him, as opposed to detract and make a problem. So I knew his taste. I knew I'd been working for him for a couple of years before I even tried it, and everybody seemed to respond positively to it. So uh, it would usually, by the time the beam was being played, the sequences were gone, but the delays for the uh, sequences, the timing was still intact. So he could then play into that timing, and I could bring up something else, and he'd be still sort of had the continuity of the material that he was been playing before, rhythmically anyway.
So but you ended up eventually having a keyboard with you, and
The keyboard was there before I started um, uh, playing, because I realized that running on stage and tweaking a sound was kind of impossible to do at the same time. If I was hitting the sound, I couldn't manipulate it. But if I had a keyboard there to play the sound and then tweak it at the same time, was going to be way more efficient. So I just got a keyboard and plugged it in, and I could make that 48 input console be all me, or press a button and it'd be all them.
you ended up becoming, I guess, a regular part of drums in space.
Yeah, yeah. It would be a direction we'd go in.
You told me at one point Phil came by and said, "Keep playing." Was that early on?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He comes walking by. I had got my headphones on. He picks up my earphone and just screams in my ear, "Keep playing!" Like, okay. And so then it started out as I would um, make sure I was out of the way, because I had this relationship with Mickey, and I knew he was liking it, and I would pull. He would leave, and the beam would be reverberating and echoing, and I would pull everything down to get out of the way of the frontline guys for the space section. And Phil, at that point, encouraged me to allow the segue between them to happen, between the drums and the space, so that I could keep playing until they were established back on stage. They'd tuned up, they'd checked their instruments, the sound was still going. They had whoever got there first was interested in playing with my sound, so I could interact with them. And eventually, when enough guys got there, which is a couple of minutes, pull out of the way, and they could interact as they would. It was fun. It was very fun.
I mean, this, I guess, culminated in you producing the compilation album of Drums in Space, Infrared Roses. How did that come about?
Well, I began to realize that there was no that the drums and spaces had evolved to a new place with all this technology and the sounds and all that kind of stuff, and that there was no real record of just drums and space. And so I asked each one of those guys if I could do that. And they all individually, I didn't go to them as a group because I didn't really want them to discuss it. I just wanted permission. And each one said, yeah, go for it. Do whatever you want to do. And so I started with listening to the multi-tracks from John Cutler, a lot of multi-tracks. And this structure started appearing to me. And there was a perception for me that when they went out on a tour, there was often an idea explored in space that might come back several times during the tour. That this was something they'd explore for the tour, and then, or at least Jerry might explore one thing, and their interactions were happening. And so I came up with the idea of taking phrases from different shows and putting them together so that these phrases would start to make a musical sense of development, because it was being developed, but sometimes that first expression in the beginning of the tour has the biggest feel of improvisation, where you're on the edge of just exploring, where is this going? And you're opening up like the alap in a raga, where you're exploring the raga and you're just trying to find what the notes are and what they're most meaningful. But the second night of the show, you might go, second show, you go, hey, I know where these notes are. I'm going to play them. So you might want to open it with that first night and then develop it with the second night and conclude it with the third night. And so that's how I put together Infrared Roses. But some nights were so magical, I would just, okay, that is the night. That is the piece. And I came up with the structure of 3 parts because I felt, it's 4 sections of 3 parts each, right? The Infrared Roses. And so the idea was to develop something and then a drums in space. I'm very much attracted to 3s for some reason. It's uneven. It has a sense of, shape. So there'd be something to introduce it, and then a drums in space. The first thing was crowd sculpture. I figured start outside the venue and bring people in. And so there was that sonic montage of all these scenes outside the venue, moving into a traditional non-synthesizer drums and a non-synthesizer space. So it was my sort of acknowledgement of the great stuff that they did before I got there. And then after that, exploring how things were happening with my technologies.
Very cool. How did you decide on the name? Were there other choices?
No, there were no other choices.
There were.
All of the names were given to me by Robert Hunter. So, he was just gave him the record and he just brought everything back. This is it. And, they're gorgeous. I mean, there's a man who knew what to do with words.
Did you know him well?
I knew him. I didn't know him well. He was he was uh, kind of curmudgeonly to me, is how he seemed, but and of course I was very privileged to write songs with him, but you gave him the material and he came back with brilliant words. He liked to have the material given to him as a stereo mix with all of the music on one side and the vocal on the other. So he could tune out the vocal if he was into another kind of response to the music and just write through. And he could check in with the vocal if there was something he wanted, wanted to reference. But just phenomenal.
How did your songwriting with the band come about?
Um,
How many songs did you end up? I know Picasso Moon is probably the most famous song.
Picasso Moon, Easy Answers, and Way to Go Home. Uh, Vince and I just started working on a new song for him, and it just fell together. Uh, we were making that. We were. I remember I had the music down to one channel, and I finally got him to do the vocal in a hotel room somewhere with, DATs Jimmy wired together and playing back the music in one ear of his headphones and him singing over la la la's on the other. Oh no, yes, I think that's what he did. Because to get him to sing something, I wrote some temporary words so that he had something, but we needed to replace them with la la la's to give it to Hunter, because I didn't want to make him feel like we were trying to get distract him with stuff. But it was good. It was really fun. And then I think we went to write material in Bobby's studio, and Picasso Moon came out. It was really uh, really good. And then Easy Answers, Vince and I were in Bobby's studio to start working on that. Really, that was a fun project. And that was, originally done for a Trios record of Rob Wasserman's. Do you know the Trios record of him?
I'm not familiar with it. I know Rob Wasserman.
Well, check out the Trios record. It's really wonderful. And so that is Rob. Easy Answers is done with Rob, uh, Bobby, and Neil Young. And Neil gets a credit for what his alterations at that time, and so I'm very honored. I'm very honored to have a song with Neil Young.
How did that come about? I mean, were you guys in the same room together, or
No, Rob and Bobby went down to Neil's place. He's just down the peninsula. I don't know how much he stays there now, but he's down the peninsula. Gorgeous land, just fantastic.
so much stuff here. Bob, what else do you want to talk about? Do you want to get into any more Grateful Dead stuff? Like, do you want to talk about? I mean, I wanted to ask you about what happened when Brent died, like what that was like. Do you want to talk about that, or?
It's a lot of sadness, It's, I mean, Brent had his demons. I guess Jerry did too, but uh, Brent was Brent had his demons. He was a preacher's kid, so they're often the wildest. Um, but I had a lot of I have a lot of memories of Brent. The most he he could be so sweet and he could be. It wasn't like he was mean, but it was. Uh, it was just that he had the demons. You could see that he was on a there'd be a self-destructive energy for him, but he was so soulful and so powerful a performer that it was really just wonderful to watch him play and sing. So it was, I think everybody was thrown into a bit of chaos when Brent died. He was uh, such a strong influence on things. There's there are takes, for example, of estimated profit. In the one in Seven, right, and um, where Brent and Jerry are just having this little party interaction between them, and it's so wonderful of their trading lines and communicating back and forth. But of course, there were, which was, there was magic, and the way he sang was magical. But there were times when he was overindulging in things, and it became difficult to work with him, difficult to. I'm sure it was difficult to play with him at those times, but he needed. He had his path, uh, but really, just the feeling that it had finally happened, because he had a couple of incidents of uh, uh, at least one real OD that he got saved from before that. So it was he was he was walking a fine line, uh, and he had young kids, uh, and his fairly young wife at the time, and it was just she was gorgeous, and two kids, and just all sadness. Yeah, you know. And he had just been doing the "I will take you home," and those. It's just like, wow. So it was a heavy time, especially for me, because he was so important, uh, such an important ground for me, because I'm a keyboard player. So I enjoyed his performances in that way, and looking over his shoulder and seeing how he'd approach something. And anyway, it was very sad. We started. We all took a break. I think it was the end of it was Chicago. We did this show out of Chicago before he died, and so we were scheduled for a break, and then we needed rehearsals. I mean, rehearsals. We needed auditions. We had guys coming in, and I was the one responsible for integrating their rig into the band, if they had a rig, or if they wanted to play Brent's keyboards. Uh, I would bring those. I would set those up for them, and it must have been very difficult for the band.
especially with the history, right? The history of
Right. I mean, this is the sound of the band, and all of a sudden it's -1, and then you're looking for a replacement, and you're still looking for that sound you had. That's still in your head, that's still in your body, of when somebody hits the note, or when somebody's sense of time is matured into the band. I don't know. Yeah.
Who was on the short list to take over in that position?
Well, um, I think they decided on Vince pretty well. Well, I mean, wasn't it wasn't like it wasn't like uh, we heard those discussions so much. I heard certain things about certain people, whether which songs were which. I mean, I remember they played Estimated Profit, and when Vince left from the rehearsal, uh, Billy said, "Wow, did you hear that? He kept the seven longer than any of us." It was like, oh, he was really counting. um, uh, but I think a certain percentage of it was that Vince could hit the high harmonies, and so that Brent was hitting, so that you didn't they didn't have to rearrange all of the vocals for a new player. And I think for them that might have been a very hard part. You know, they they knew their harmonies. This is where, they're not they weren't I mean, they were professional singers, but they weren't they could, I don't know, it wasn't I think that would have been more upsetting if they had to not only integrate a new player, but also integrate a complete new arrangement of the vocals. So that was a piece of it, because of course they were looking for somebody to be able to carry those parts. Um, and he played really well at rehearsals. Vince played really well, and it's at the audition, and I think it was good. Like
How did he learn all the songs? Did from the band help him, or
um, well, I'm sure the books helped. The song books helped.
it's quite a repertoire. I mean, we're talking what 200 something songs that they could pull from on a tour.
Yeah, exactly. So it was. I remember him working the songs, and I remember him having charts in the early performances. And I remember people, the internet deadhead communications complaining that he was using charts and he should throw away the charts. It's like, I think he knows what he needs better than you do.
Yeah. I mean, come on. How could you possibly do that unless you're a next level musical genius to be able to come in and what you expect somebody to come in by ear and just remember that many songs in that short period of a time? It's impossible.
But he eventually got rid of the charts because he knew the material. He was a quick study, and he was also when uh, when somebody would do a demo of a song and he was also very, very clear and helpful in his piano parts. If let's do a demo of this. Okay, I'll put down this piano part, and it was very clear, very consistent, and very here are where the chords are. This is it may not be what he plays on the final version, but this allows everybody to participate into it with clarity. And he wasn't trying to be. He was always trying to help. How to best do it, how to make it better, and it was a wonderful thing. Uh, and and then we lost him too. So, uh, yeah, there's a lot of sadness with attached to that seat, but a lot of joy.
Do you want to talk about just the final years of the band
Sure.
and we've been going for 2 hours, 2.5 hours now. How are you feeling? You want to take a little break? Do you want to? Because I want to get into your personal projects as well. I mean, before.
Um, do you? Well, I mean, do we want to do this at another time? A second?
Yeah, we could continue the conversation at another date. That would be great because I think at this point, we've gone over a lot of ground here, and it'll be better for you come in fresh and
Yeah, yeah. Come back fresh, and but might as well talk about the final years.
yeah, let's talk about the final years.
Finish this section over. What would you like? Where would you like me to address that?
Any stories you have? I mean, I think it would be really interesting just to get an idea of what it was like to be part of this huge of an operation and this big of a tour. Also, like just the general thing of, and also of being part of a totally unique experience because, um, not that many bands had thousands of people following them, had such a crazy dedicated fan base of people that their entire life was centered around the band. And also, I guess I touched on this before, but the uniqueness of being part of a show that's not a show. It'd be one thing if you did this big tour. I mean, 99% of the bands out there, they're playing a show. They're playing a set sequence of songs, and they're usually trying to play the songs exactly the same as best as they possibly can play them. I think this is a totally different animal to be part of something on the technical side when you don't really know what's coming. And I mean, it's flying without a net a little bit. It's like,
Yeah, it really became evident to me early on that Grateful Dead sounds had to be beautiful, uh, whether the volume was, 2 or the volume was 10. You couldn't play it at 2 and have a bunch of noise in there. Because, if you're playing a show that is the same every night, which is more Stevie's scene, he'd have sections where complete improvisation, but we played the same show pretty much. If those horns only come in at 10 for this song, then you only have to worry about them coming in at 10. But for the Grateful Dead, you might have Jerry playing a trumpet at very low, sweet volumes, intricate, and also playing them blaringly loud. And you had to be able to move that direction because you don't know when they're going to change. You don't know when the sound is going to the sound is going to be required to be loud or soft, and that delicate thing always had to shine through, and it had to be quiet and clean and pristine feeling. So this is an unusual experience from the very beginning. They were not going to, and it's a wonderful. It was amazing, man. It was just amazing. Garcia could just rip the roof off of a stadium. He could make a coliseum just turn on its side by bending one note in a way that never happened before. It just it was this experience, the process of the audience being such a huge influence on what was being played right now was phenomenal. It became really big not as big as it is now, I think, which is quite amazing. But it was a huge it was a huge thing. I think when we went to Europe, they said 10,000 people went to Europe to follow us. 10,000 people. I don't think most of the venues we played could hold 10,000. You know?
Were there people that you would recognize through the years and through the shows?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of my first. I mean, the idea of the deadhead being a spaced out person was destroyed on one of my first shows of that summer tour. That first summer tour where we were playing the Harmonic Convergence in Telluride, Colorado, and it was before the show, and I had heard that there was some great corn in one of the vendors out there that I should go try that corn. So I went out and went to get some corn, and on my way back to the stage, some guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, you know that sound that Brent played on that violin sound that you gave him? And this is my first fucking tour. Nobody should know who I am." But they were paying attention to actually describe the song and the venue that they first heard this sound that Brent played. And they knew who I was. What the fuck? Who has an audience like that? Just walking through the crowd. And my first tour with the band, just amazing to me. So there were all levels of these kids out there. I mean, some of them would say, I transmitted from the back of the stadium to Jerry to play Morning Dew next, and he did. He got my message. I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad he got it. I'm glad you sent it. It was a good version. But so there's kids who are sort of on that ethereal connection to the band, and people who were incredibly detailed. I mean, people like David Gans, who just turned it into a sophisticated education of what's going on. I sat in with a lecture class that David Gans did with Stanford University this year. Phenomenal. Beyond the idea that of scholarly work, it's just amazing. And part of that, of course, is because there are tapes. The band there's a record of everything they did. So you can compare it. You can say, okay, this person did this then and that there, and how did they change that? And of course, I did something at a university in Massachusetts, I think it was, and I walked into a lecture hall, and somebody was talking about the day Jerry changed from this mode to that mode in a dark star. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it was intentional, or maybe he broke a string. It's like, either way, he changed modes. So, yeah. So it's all. I mean, it was incredibly well done. They treated touring like it was a lifestyle, not an occasional thing that they were going to go out every year. They tried to do it no more than 3 weeks at a time. So they'd have the road, they'd have some life at home, and they'd have the road. Um, sometimes it was 4 or 5 weeks, but that was the exception. Uh, and they, did it well, did it comfortably. It was I don't think anybody will ever do that again.
Definitely not at that scale.
Yeah, because it built as a family. It built. It wasn't a business to begin with. So when I first joined the Grateful Dead scene, I think I saw two of them, and this was they were they called them public meetings or something like that, and it was everybody who was employed by the Grateful Dead would come to this meeting place in some hotel and voice their opinions. It's 130 something people. The person stuffing the t-shirts in could have an opinion about something, and they would listen.
Incredible.
It was amazing. Of course, that as the band grew, and the decision making process became more complicated, and finances and all this started to run into. It became too cumbersome for them to continue those meetings. Um, I things exploded when Jerry returned from his coma. Right, that's when the band first really started moving into this realm where it became superstardom to me. It's like, okay, he's back. We Will Survive. Touch of Grey goes to top 10. And all of a sudden, the decision making process starts to become cumbersome. That the band needs to negotiate these things together. They have to have these meetings where nobody else is involved, make their decisions, understand the money, understand the logistics, and move forward. And at that point, I think these big meetings became just too cumbersome. Uh, the 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 they were listening to people having something to say who had no idea of the difficulties in the making the decisions and the complexities of the decisions. So they tended to have the private band meetings, and then these meetings with production to set things up for the tours. But even when I was starting, it was just nobody would do this. This is the hippest thing I've ever seen in business. Yeah,
I think it's a smart way to get real world feedback from the people that are doing the job.
it was amazing, and I think they were always, they had spent so much time with so many of the support staff, years and years and years of dedication and commitment, that they had open channels with a lot of those people. They could talk to them. You know, it wasn't as though they refused to communicate to those people anymore. It was just that it became a bad way to conduct business.
So, in general, I mean, it sounds like that this was a really efficient, well run operation
Yes,
at a massive scale.
I would say that uh, it was that, but efficiency was not necessarily the priority. It was more, um, there was a style of living that they wanted to maintain. Um, and I don't mean just the quality of their life, but the way they were open and available to everybody. You know, Bobby was always concerned about little details of my life that, most people wouldn't consider. It wouldn't be efficient for him to have that relationship with me. But hey, this is who he was, and he wasn't going to compromise that. So it was efficient, but it was efficiency designed around them and the touring group and whatever we, I mean, certainly, if I needed any piece of equipment on the road, I just told one guy, and it would show up in a day or two. It was, that kind of efficiency was unparalleled. Nobody needed to, it was very impressive.
You didn't have a lot of stress doing this job, even though you were, or did you? I mean, what was?
Of course I did. How could you not?
Yeah, especially at the scale we're talking about. In the era that you're involved in, I mean, this is referred to as the mega dead era. I mean, you're playing stadiums, you're playing Madison Square Garden 10 nights in a row. I mean, you got to be a little nervous about something breaking right in the middle of the set. Would that kind of thing keep you up at night, or
Some nights, the one of the most wonderful things about touring is all you really need to worry about is the music. There isn't much you can do at home. There isn't much you can do in some other situation. You are out just committed to the music. So that takes on this, you really want to get it right for everybody. Now, the size of the audience for the band was increasing, and I certainly felt that energy when I was involved in the performance, but the size of my audience didn't really shift. It was the band. And that pressure was large enough. I mean, that was stress. I mean, it was. I mean, it may be a reflection of me, but I didn't feel like there was any place to rest on laurels. I mean, even at the very end of the Grateful Dead, I was working with Candace Brightman, the lighting designer, on having the Midi hook up to the lights. And we even played quite a few shows where I reintegrated all of the MIDI sounds, the MIDI signals, not the sounds, and sent them to Candace. And I sent them on different MIDI channels. She would spread them out on different sections of the lights. And during space, each member of the band was controlling light chases, sequences of lights. Each step was moved forward with each MIDI note, so that the band would be there and the lights would be over them, and with each note they played, the lights would shift. And it was stunning because it created organic movement in the lights that couldn't happen any other way. It would have required an overall calculation of something that made it impossible to have this organic step through kind of thing. Jerry played a 3 or 4 notes in a row, and then Phil would respond, and at the tempo that he responds, the lights are moving. It was pretty amazing.
That's really cool. Are there any like concert videos of these shows?
I'll have to look for them. I'm sure there must be.
Like a pro shot, one done by the band. That would be really cool for somebody to check out.
I'm sure most of the videos that are done by the band are edited videos of the video guy, with close-ups on. But it was, I mean, and it took somebody like Candace to want to get into it, and she's The lights were amazing.
When I'm thinking about it from your perspective, I mean, this is another level of complexity here. Like to be managing all these systems is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't know. I mean, I'm old now, so my memory isn't as strong as it used to be, but fuck, I had everybody's presets, numbers, sounds in my head. I could go to Phil's rack and go, boom, here's that sound you wanted. Not have to think about it, not have to look it up.
How often would Phil and Bobby and Jerry be triggering sounds? This was like a song by song basis, right?
Well, Phil only did it during space. Bobby mostly did it in space. Jerry, uh, would crank out certain things, for whether it's,
I will take you home, right?
yeah, yeah. And he'd do a flute sometimes in a bird song, uh, different things. He sometimes did that. Where in the range he played it was sounded very bassoon like, but it was really designed as a. I mean, he sound very oboe like, but it was a double reed bassoon sound. At least it's how I set it up. In my head was for the lower ranges, and then he took it into these upper ranges. Okay, it sounds better that way, but uh, and so he would do that. So it was really space. Drums in space became this focal point. Of course, it was the place to experiment, and new sounds were always an experiment. So new sounds always came in during drums in space. That'd be a place that you know, when I gave them new sounds every show, and the first time, unless they played it and they said, okay, I know exactly what to do with this on which song, they would experiment and see how it responded to their touch during space, and then eventually integrate it into bird song or whatever. I will take you home or uh, all sorts of stuff. So, but I just, it was that kind of daily approach. It was every day I was in going through people's sounds and things like that. And, um, I, uh, I think what kept me up at night is if I did something wrong. Didn't bother them that much because they knew that, they never, I say, hey, sorry about that. And, oh, don't, what the fuck? A mistake. We all make them kind of thing. But for me, it's like, okay, how do I fix that? Or, you may have an idea of how to fix something, but you've got to wait. If you're lucky to the next day, if you're not lucky, you've got a travel day and a setup day, and then maybe you'll have time to fix it, or maybe you won't. Depends on what the morning brings you. And
But when you're a band that improvises live, you have to be pretty accepting that you're going to have bad nights and you're going to make mistakes.
yeah, yeah, I just didn't want them to be mine. I mean, these are all of them awesome musicians. Like at levels you just hope to try to touch. And here I was touching them. So it was wonderful.
What were the final years like? I mean, we're I know it's written that Jerry's health was deteriorating. When he did die, was it unexpected, or did people kind of think that maybe he was wearing himself out and this was something that was in the realm of possibility?
Well, he had just been through a rehab, right? And I think he was pretty serious about that. And he ended up dying in a rehab facility that he had seen before, and he knew might have the possibility of taking care of him. But it wasn't the rehab facility that he had done the rehab in, or at least not this one. I don't really. And so we knew he was. We it was it was within the realm of possibility, but it was still a shock. There was no way. Uh, there was no way for any of us to conceive of the band without him. And I remember I called my pal John Cutler when I heard it on the news, and he hadn't heard, and he was the one who called me to tell me about Brent. So that was a sad moment of full cycle. And also, I mean, Jerry brought musicality to everything. It was just the way he looked at the world. And always, what does the music need? How can I add to it to elevate the music? What it's a very enlightened perspective, because he knows what his ego is. He knows what he can do. He knows how well he can do it. But when he looks at the work, he's looking at, what does this need? And then how can I do it? As opposed to, what can I do here? How do I insert myself? It's like, okay, what does the music need? Now let me figure out what to do. And there never will be anybody like him. I mean, just complete, totally entertaining to talk to, brilliant. And that's, brilliant with new stuff about movies and words and music, and very in-depth person who just like would go right into the center, the heart of the matter. So it was a huge loss for everyone. And, as Brent said, I was the new guy, so it was even worse for many more people who've been around for 30 years or something, and very difficult for a lot of people to absorb. But the band found ways to reinvent itself again in different ways. Dead and Company's doing great. We got a show coming up here, walking distance from my house, in Golden Gate Park in August.
A Dead and Company show.
Yeah,
It's kind of amazing all the different iterations of the bands and all the different band members' projects that they've put together and continue to just have a loyal following and sell out huge shows throughout the years.
yeah,
Pretty unusual. And continuing to attract new fans
that's what's phenomenal.
30 years after Jerry's death. I mean, I think one is testament to the music. I mean, not everything was about the fact that they played these incredible shows and they were this iconic band and they were culturally extremely important. In my opinion, it comes down to number one, they had great songs. Um, and without that, I don't think anything else would have been possible. It's great music, really touching, memorable lyrics, and when you get the combination of the two, you have magic.
Right. Uh, Barlow and Hunter, just amazing, just amazing. Um, it, yeah, it, you know, Hunter could use three words and conjure up images of America that are just right from the heart.
The visuals of the song,
Yeah, yeah, and Barlow could do an attitude that made you want to it made non-guitar players want to play the guitar, and it was so phenomenal to me. And I think you're right. It's that combination, and also um, the songs were not only great songs but great vehicles for them. They became uh, the things that they did to go somewhere with. Um, very rarely did you hear them just, here's the song with a little solo and the end. It became this vehicle to explore the music and the song and the harmonies and to land you back from that exploration to the words of the song and to where it was going to leave you. I just did a version of Standing on the Moon with Henry Kaiser. And what a song. I mean, I'm not singing in it, but beautiful vocal by a lovely singer. And she just delivers it very matter of factly. And yet it works so beautifully. I mean, she's got a great voice, but you don't have to do much to those words for them to be meaningful, and I can't help. I mean, she did a beautiful job at the ending, but that "Be with You," I want to be with you at the end. I will always hear Garcia singing that.
yeah, I've got my favorite version of that, and you know, like all the songs, everybody's got their favorite version.
Yeah, and it's like an uh, the way he uh, the way he was vulnerable in his vocal that made you feel uh, like he could almost be crying through the lyrics, and it's just amazing.
Really touching to watch that that song in particular. I can't remember exactly which video it is, but there is one I've got on my one of my playlists that I come back to on YouTube. I'm always just blown away by it. I was just blown away by it.
Yeah, it's just just there will never be another Grateful Dead, and I just am so appreciative that I got to play a little part in what they were doing, and just magic, magic. And at the same time, we're talking about these intimate notes, moments with a song, and how they could be very quiet, and at the same time in drums and space, play totally avant-garde musical ideas with the same commitment of just blow your mind with something and then come back. It's like, wow.
Not many rock bands. I mean, somebody had said to me years ago that they thought the interesting thing about the Grateful Dead was that they were the first rock band that took this jazz mentality of free improvisation and did it in a rock and roll environment. To them, that's why they were innovative. This was a guy that was on the scene in San Francisco in like 62 and had some interesting stories about the hate and his whole thing. He told me the real whole reason the scene happened in San Francisco was because you could rent a house for $60 a month or something and have 10 people live there and everybody's paying $5-6 a month for rent. And then he'd go out and play a show and he'd get paid $80 or $100 for the show. And he contrasted it to these days, you know, a lot of times you pay to play at a lot of venues in big cities like Los Angeles or New York. And, you know, you're paying $2,000 a month for rent. And just to see all the incredible creative environment, all the great music and stuff and that came out of this era, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and the support of people like Bill Graham, to make it a thriving musical scene. And
Did you get to know him?
a little bit, yeah. Yeah.
Were you at the memorial concert?
Yes.
A great Grateful Dead concert, another great concert.
Yeah. I walked through the audience the first time I got dosed.
The first time?
Well, I have dosed myself, but it's the first time somebody sprayed something and I go, oh.
Holy shit, that's one to remember. But you were already on tour how many years at that point? That was what? Was that 91?
95 was when the memorial.
He died in 95, Bill Graham.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, that was the Jerry that I got dosed, the Jerry.
You got dosed at the Jerry Garcia memorial concert.
Yeah. No, I was backstage at the Bill Graham. What a phenomenal. That was amazing. The lineup was phenomenal.
And the Dead played great.
Yeah, they took it seriously.
Yeah, very cool. We covered a lot of ground. Do you want to maybe continue the conversation at another point and we can get into it'd be great to talk about all your personal music stuff and your philosophy on music and all the projects that you're involved in.
I would love to do that.